So we've got to kick it off with the Tren de Aragua deportations. And yesterday, there was this hearing on in the court of Judge Boasberg, which is in the D.C. Federal District Court. And he's trying to decide whether the Trump administration committed contempt of court because a month ago, after Trump put 3 plane loads of suspected Venezuelan gang members on planes, at least one plane of which had already been ordered to be removed by a federal district judge, and said, get out of here. You're going to El Salvador. The ACLU ran into court, said, Judge Boasberg, please stop it. It's unconstitutional. And he said, you know what? It might be. Stop those planes. And said to the Trump administration, if those planes are in the air, you turn them around right now. I don't care if they've left U.S. airspace. Tell them to turn their asses around, get those illegals back to America. And with respect to 2 of those planes, they'd already left, and they did not comply with an order to turn the flights around. And with respect to the 3rd plane, it had not yet left, but it did not have any illegals on it who were being deported under the controversial law that was in front of Judge Boasberg, which is the Alien Enemies Act. So the Trump administration didn't feel like they had to do anything on that plane because they were like, these people have been ordered removed. We're not using the Alien Enemies Act. You really have no jurisdiction to say anything about those illegals, Judge. So this judge is pissed off about the fact that we didn't turn those planes around and bring them back. And he might hold the Trump administration in contempt. But before we even get to that, Mike Davis, this judge did issue an injunction a month ago saying, and no more deportations under the Alien Enemies Act. You turn those planes around and no more using the Alien Enemies Act to deport Venezuelan gang members, period, until I've decided whether there's really an invasion or a predatory incursion, which is what's required under the Alien Enemies Act for the president to be able to deport them in the way he has. I will decide. And the Trump administration said, no, you won't. You will not, because the jurisprudence interpreting this act has said there is no judicial review of that call. And things didn't change in the past 250 years. You didn't find new executive authorities as a district court judge. You will not determine whether there's been a predatory incursion. That's Trump's call, period. And there's been legal precedent to that effect. And Judge Boasberg said, I will decide. Screw you. I don't accept this. It went up to the D.C. Circuit Court of Appeals. They ruled 2-1 for now to support Judge Boasberg and his restraining order against the Trump deportations. And Trump went to the Supreme Court to say, reverse that restraining order. This is an outrage. These courts don't have review over me. Not on this. The high court hasn't issued any ruling. They have asked for briefing on the case, and briefing has come in. The Trump administration appealed. The ACLU filed its responsive appellate brief, and now the Trump administration just filed its reply. So it's fully briefed, and we're awaiting a call by the Supreme Court on the underlying substantive case. And then there's the second matter of whether they should be held in contempt. That was a 5-minute recitation of a very complex legal case. I hope I got it right. Mike Davis, why do you say the Trump administration is right?
President Trump campaigned on the fact that he's going to cut waste, fraud, and abuse. He's going to secure our border, and he's going to get these illegal immigrants, particularly this vicious terrorist gang Tren de Aragua, along with MS-13, the hell out of our country. And President Trump is doing the unthinkable. He's actually doing what he promised American voters he would do, and he's doing it fast, right? And President Trump won a broad electoral mandate. He won 312 electoral votes, all 7 swing states. He won the popular vote. He kept the House. He won a comfortable majority in the Senate, and he's exercising core Article 2 power under our Constitution. He's not stealing Congress's legislative power under Article 1. He's not stealing the Supreme Court's judicial power under Article 3. He is enforcing our laws. He's repelling an invasion of our country, which he has the absolute constitutional right, constitutional duty to do under Article 2 of our Constitution, separate from any statute, separate from any case law, separate from any regulation. He's doing what the Constitution requires. And these judges are exercising jurisdiction they do not have. This Judge Boasberg I think it was 4 Saturdays ago, when he was not even the emergency docket judge, opened up his courtroom. He exposed an ongoing military, law enforcement, and intel operation. He endangered American lives and the lives of our allies. We saw the security blueprints in El Salvador. We saw the massive number of soldiers, intel officers, law enforcement ready to take the most dangerous terrorist in the Western Hemisphere. This judge ordered planes to turn around. Did he know the fuel levels? Did he know what the security footprint was back in America? He did not have the power to do this. He doesn't have the power to have this case, period, but let alone to sabotage an ongoing military operation and expose it and endanger American and allied lives. This is why I'm calling for his impeachment, and I don't say that lightly.
Dave?
Well, good to be back with you, Megyn, and my friend Mike. You know, Mike heads a group called Article 3 Project. You can see it on his wallpaper, as opposed to my background, which is of a St. Bernard. But as far it's called intellectual heft. But, you know, as Mike would know, Article 3, which is the judiciary, does not define the judicial power. And so the Constitution does not limit the remedial powers of the federal courts. And so you have Congress that could step in and put in regulations and limits. But here, the judge is doing what a judge is supposed to do, and that is checks and balances, Marbury versus Madison, judicial review. And the judge here is saying that you can't use the Alien Enemies Act to deport these folks without more due process because, hold on, we're not at war with Venezuela. There's not been a congressional act of war. And so we're going to put a hold on this. And the Trump administration has tried to play games with it by saying, well, we are complying with your written order, but not your verbal order. Also, when you came out with your order, the planes were already in international airspace. You don't have jurisdiction. You know, they're playing games with it. And ultimately, it's going to be the Supreme Court that makes a decision here, because the law is what the Supreme Court says it is. So far, everything is actually going according to plan. You know, I have to tell my folks on the left to say, hey, calm down. This is not a coup. This is actually the proper way to deal with this, where the administration appeals these matters all the way up to the Supreme Court. And they have not said they're defying Judge Boasberg's order. They're saying that Judge Boasberg's order doesn't apply because, you know, it was at international airspace. So as of now, I've tried to walk people off
and they're saying they didn't apply and that he didn't have the authority to issue them. Both. They're arguing both.
Correct,
but they are complying. Right. They are proceeding as though he did have the authority.
Exactly. That's why I'm trying to say that to the folks who are saying this is a coup. No, actually, because they are saying that they are complying or he doesn't have the power, that actually is a legitimate argument they can take up to the Supreme Court, as opposed to, no, you do not have the authority to issue a ruling, and we're going to ignore whatever ruling you come up with anyways. That's different.
Okay, but Dave, how is it the federal district courts are allowed in the argument of the ACLU to decide whether there's been an incursion, a predatory incursion by a foreign government? How are they better positioned to determine that than the commander-in-chief and the sitting president of the United States?
Well, they're entitled to interpret the Alien Enemies Act. And here, the judge is saying there's not been a declaration of war. And so this act does not apply, does not give the executive branch the authority to make these decisions.
You're not answering. No. So let me stop you there, because there's 3 different ways that you can get Alien Enemies Act to apply: act of war, invasion, or predatory incursion. Trump seems to be citing the latter two. They don't seem to be arguing that we're necessarily at war with Venezuela, but for sure he's saying, if you look at his declaration, it says invasion and predatory incursion. So there's no question that you can have those other things without Congress.
Oh, and the executive branch has the ability to interpret that statute as it wants, just like the judiciary can say, no, you've gone too far. Article 3 gives the power of the judiciary to look at matters like this and say, no, this is our check. This is our balance.
They're not allowed to decide political questions, Dave. How is it not a political question whether we've suffered a predatory invasion from Venezuela?
You know who decides that, Megyn? It's the U.S. Supreme Court, and it is telling that the Supreme Court has not jumped in. They never
questioned our declaration of war after 9/11. They didn't question our declaration of war with respect to Iraq or Afghanistan. The courts have typically been reluctant to go anywhere near that kind of political declaration because they understand when you're talking about political questions, the president is at the apex of his powers, and the courts, to say they're at their nadir, they have nothing. They have none.
Only Congress has the power to declare war. The executive branch does not have.
But this is something different.
Well, remember, the Alien Enemies Act says declaration of war, or as you correctly said, there has to be an invasion or a threatened invasion. And the president doesn't have the unlimited, unchecked power to interpret that act to say, I'm going to decide there's an invasion. Because if you give the president that kind of power, then Katie bar the door. There is no limit to executive power now.
We are Katie bar the door. Tariff wars, stubborn inflation, no wonder gold's been routinely hitting all-time highs. In volatile markets like the one we have now, don't sit on the sidelines. You can take control and safeguard your savings. That's why so many are turning to Birch Gold Group. They've helped tens of thousands convert an existing IRA or 401k into one in physical gold. It's time for you to hedge against the economic instability with gold. Text MK to 989898. Birch Gold will send you a free, no-obligation info kit. Text MK to 989898. A+ rating with the Better Business Bureau, countless 5-star reviews. Birch Gold is there for you. MK to 989898 today. Thanks so much for watching. If you like what you just saw, hit the subscribe button for more clips and full episodes.